Hello and welcome to Voices of Enablement by GTM Buddy, an interview series focusing on the key issues affecting the enablement community today. It's a tough market right now. Organizations are cutting staff, pausing investment. How do you make a compelling case for the value of enablement is the question that we are seeking to answer. So our guest today is Scott Powell. He has served as a VP of Enablement at Optimizely and Handshake previously, and brings a ton of experience into sales enablement and sales effectiveness. Welcome, Scott. Pleasure having you on the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks very much for having me here. I really appreciate the invite. Yes, I'm Scott Powell. I'm the CEO of Enablepoint. My team provides enablement support for the people that need support without having to add additional headcount. So we do it on a contract and fractional basis. As you said, I'm the former VP of enablement at both Optimizely and Handshake. In both cases, I was brought in as the first VP of those organizations for enablement to up-level the enablement function to be a strategic priority and build those teams. And so I have a lot of experience in building the teams, the functions, the technology, and all the support around the enablement function. And I'm a huge fan of enablement, being a strategic enabler and being a force multiplier for people like the chief revenue officers and the people who are my customers. Those are the go-to-market leaders. So excited to talk to you today about the importance of enablement, especially in the recession.
Absolutely, Scott. Really excited about this. And the very first thing Scott said when I reached out to him was that I love to stand up for enablement. And he said, ever since there have been a lot of layoffs, a lot of CEOs have come to him for help, that this is where we need the help. And that's where I think your company is all about. So really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, and I've noticed over the time that that people have cut the teams back, but the major initiatives still need to get done. And so that's what we do, is we come in and we run things for a project for a month or a project for a quarter. And it could be something like rolling out a methodology or getting a kickoff ready. And this will be my 10th kickoff that's coming up in February. So excited to be working on another one.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of other enablers will see a lot of value. Again, as I said, Scott has a ton of information. So let's just get into this. Scott, like as we already stressed, there have been a lot of layoffs, and enablement is seen as a cost center versus a force multiplier. There have been a lot of talks on how can you show the ROI of enablement. So the very first question I have is, how do you elevate the role of sales enablement with the C-suite when many of the support functions are being cut?
Excellent question. One of the things is to make sure that you have a seat at the leadership table. Ask yourself, are you attending the forecast calls? Are you meeting with the go-to-market leaders on a regular basis? And then most importantly, are you matching your metrics that you measure the enablement function by to what their metrics are? And I'll give you some examples, but I wanted to at least emphasize the point, be part of their plan and then bring them into your own planning when you're planning the enablement roadmap. Recently, I showed an enablement roadmap to a team, and this was the first time they had seen one that was charted out for more than, say, 90 days. We have product roadmaps, but you should also have enablement roadmaps so people know what's coming. And then articulate the value. You should shout it from the rooftops when it comes to sharing the value that your team is bringing. Frequently, enablement leaders will simply assume that everybody knows what their team is doing and the value that they're bringing. And then in hard times, all of a sudden, enablement is seen as a cost center. So let me share a slide that brings these points out. Just going to bring it into presentation mode here.
Sure.
Okay. So you asked the question about, how do we elevate the role of sales enablement with the C-suite when many functions are being cut? I mentioned the seat at the leadership table. Get in there with the chief revenue officer, with heads of the other C-suite leaders, and understand their needs. Don't assume that they know what you're doing. That's where the articulating the value comes in. Make sure that you are shouting it from the rooftops and telling them exactly what contributions you're bringing. And then when it comes to aligning your future metrics to those of the C-suite, have a conversation about how you're measuring the business, especially with people like the chief revenue officer. And then get them involved in the enablement roadmap. I'm going to share some examples of enablement KPIs that I've used in the past, like sales rep ramp. Obviously, ramp is quite common. Productivity is measured by bookings divided by ramp reps. And then time to the first deal. That's pretty common. But are we tracking that consistently over time in multiple quarters? Participation of percent at or above quota. And then here's a big one that I've seen in multiple organizations. That's contribution. The percent of people that have closed at least one deal in a given quarter. And then in sales rep generated pipeline. This is different than SDR, BDR generated pipeline or partner generated pipeline. It's what are they doing to achieve a target goal of, usually it's around 4x of their pipeline, that they themselves generate. And then lastly, what is the conversion rate for opportunities closed won? Now, those are enablement KPIs. Here are some sales KPIs that are frequently used in when I do cross-functional work with both sales and sales operations. The average sales cycle, the sales price, the spiff attainment, the number of people qualifying for that, the average tenure, time and seat, and rep attrition. The existing reps divided by the exiting reps divided by the total reps, and then annual contract value. We want to see that going up. And one thing not listed here is the ratio between new and existing business. We can't have a leaky bucket, so we need to have just enough existing business to keep the lights on and make sure that we have recurring revenue.
Awesome. And Scott, all the metrics that you spoke about again, are all tying back to the sales velocity, of the reps, and that is what CEO and the CRO care about. A lot of enablement initiatives that have been run in the past, or the people that I've spoken to, doesn't really have an alignment on the metrics that this is the impact that we are going to bring. It's more about the training and okay, this is what we are doing. I think that is where the alignment on the metrics and the sales velocity outcomes that you are talking about were missing. And this is one way where we can elevate the role of enablement. That is where they will truly see you as a strategic partner versus somebody who is probably just running the trainings or reaching out to the reps to do a particular training. So I'm sure this is something that is very helpful for the other enablement practitioners.
Yeah, don't be seen as the person who just schedules training.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, one more question I have on this one is, I forgot, I think somebody said to me that enablement is not responsible for sales, but they're responsible to sales. And it takes a tripod approach to make any initiative successful. The sales management, the enablement themselves, and the leadership. So can you talk to more us about the orchestration of the enablement initiative that you have to do? I know enablement has to do a lot of internal selling before they run any initiative. Can you talk to us more about the role of frontline sales manager or the leadership? How do you orchestrate this entire enablement initiative before running one?
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question, because I have 3 goals in enablement. And one is that my team is the customer success team for go-to-market. So I support beyond sales. I support customer success, partners, BDR, SDR function as well. And so their success is our success. I'm actually compensated in multiple roles. I've been compensated on the success of the go-to-market teams. And so obviously, I want them to do well. And so they're my customers. That's number 1. Number 2 is to create an environment of continuous learning. And that's directly relevant to our discussion today. Beyond bootcamp, making sure that things like certification are relevant. You design it with the people who need it. It's real time. It's not past its expiration date. And it's repeatable. If I do it for the sales, I repeat it for the sales success team. And that way, you make raving fans of the enablement team with those go-to-market leaders that are saying, hey, he treats me like I'm a customer, he delivers continuous enablement, and he designs the programs with me. So it's real simple, and this is why I love enablement. I go to, say, a sales leader, I ask them what they need, they tell me that, I go make it for them, we design it together, and then we roll it out together. Like, okay, in this month, we're all going to do the training. And then at quarter end, I leave them alone. And then we rinse and repeat. And we make improvements and roll it out again. And that's the cycle that I've developed with my go-to-market leaders.
Yeah, so I think, again, I think I read somewhere the situation learning program. It's more about liaising with the sales leaders, identifying where the problem is. Is it more about helping reps do more of a discovery, better discovery calls, or you take one metric, like you said, and then run the entire initiatives, according to that. And then at the end of the quarter or end of the 6 months, you leave them alone because you have shown your impact and this is the value you have delivered, and then you move on to the next initiative. So I think, again, coming back to the basics, alignment on the initiatives and the metrics, defining that before running out an enablement initiative is very critical.
Yeah, and be the person they want to see, not the person that they grown when they see you and they think, oh God, here comes some more training.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the other thing that you mentioned was it is going beyond sales, the customer success, as well as the other teams, the partners. And again, right, where 50 to 60% of a customer lifetime value is we are getting from the customer success or from the partners. So I think that is where a lot of companies are not spending enough enablement efforts, is to enable their partners or enable their customer success team. They're very much focused on the sales. So I think this is one, because it's all about, especially in a SaaS world where the entire revenue enablement, they bring in a lot of revenue. So I think that is another thing that other sales enablement practitioners, they need to follow, that not just look at sales, but also look at the other function, every customer facing role, because they are somehow responsible for getting more revenue.
It's a very good point. And first of all, whenever I have a function or an event like a kickoff, I always survey the team afterwards. And if someone comes back and says, this was too sales specific, then we have not taken care of that constituency, like the customer success team. Another thing that I do is on my enablement teams that I've formed in the past is they're primarily people that have had customer facing roles, so that they have the credibility in front of that go-to-market leader, that customer success enablement manager has been a customer success manager themselves.
Yeah. And I think, again, that is where we are able to align everybody, and we are able to complete the circle right from sales to, again, the post sales, which is the customer success. So I think that is how the enablement program should be.
Excellent.
All right.
Totally.
Yeah. So this next question, Scott, I have is, we know revenue enablement is critical for the organization. I think the time like this, selling is tougher more than ever. Enablement support is required more than ever. So, what do you think is the role of enablement in a current economic time like this? How do you think, you can help the revenue organizations?
Yeah, I think it's now more than ever is my attitude towards enablement. Because with the current economic environment, smaller teams have been a result of cutbacks in not only enablement has been cut back, but sales teams have been cut back. And as a direct result of that, you see territories that are getting bigger for some reps, you see quotas that are getting bigger, and this actually increases the need for support and training. These people are more requiring of support than ever before. Also, giving an example, we've invested a lot into sellers. Say you've run command of the message or medic training through a vendor, not cheap. It can be very effective, but it needs to be reinforced over time. If the enablement team isn't there to do that, who is? And then that means that you spend a great deal of money on something like a methodology, and then it's not being used. It's so common for something like an investment like that. 1 year later, it's not really being applied. The real test is it being applied in the one-on-ones between managers and their sellers? And then enablement reinforces the skills, but they also validate the knowledge and skills. Are we testing the sellers, the go-to-market teams, for what they know? Or are we assuming that they know the product? Are we assuming that they know discovery and prospecting? And then also, not only new sellers, but tenured sellers also need support at every deal stage. There's not one person in any organization that is perfect at every deal stage. And so we have very senior tenured reps that may need more help with discovery or prospecting. And so that comes to the one-on-one tailored approach that I can talk about later. But the intent is to say you do a concierge or a white glove approach towards everyone to find out what they need and then deliver it for them. But one thing you want to avoid is the one size fits all.
Yep. So again, this is one conversation again I have with almost every enablement person, that there's a forgetting curve. People forget 70-80% of the information. So how do you reinforce that information? When it is required is the role of enablement. It's not just about doing the initial training and then leaving them alone. It's more about reinforcement. I think that is where the real value of enablement or the optimum ROI of the enablement efforts will come. And that also brings me to the next question, because it's part of your the point. In a time like this, not a lot of companies are hiring new reps, and we know enablement is not just about the onboarding. So what kind of initiatives can enablement support to tenured reps? Like, how do you think can enablement support the tenured reps? You already touched upon the discovery things and everything, but we'll have to dig more on this.
Yeah, it's interesting because so many organizations see enablement as being responsible for bootcamp or onboarding, and they don't on that. As I said earlier, one of my goals is to go beyond bootcamp to create an environment of continuous learning. And so when I was at Cloudera leading that team, I created this spectrum from hire to quota. And on the left, you see new hire training. That's what people associate with bootcamp and onboarding. But let's assume that just goes away, that we pretty much are no longer doing that for this recession period. Well, that leaves a whole lot left to include ongoing training. To me, certification is that validation that we discussed. It's the flagship of ongoing training. It's proving and validating knowledge. And then also, my enablement teams have frequently run not only kickoffs, but QBRs as well. So we're getting involved with the sales leaders and finding out what's working and what's not. We are linked at the hip with product training, especially when it comes to things like certifications. And then competitive intel is your friend. This is something that's going to make a difference, especially in the recession. And then sprint training. We had when I was at Optimize, we would actually produce 15-minute videos each week to support and validate training. They were kind of fun. Like on Valentine's Day, we'd have a video about why we love our product, coming from all the different leaders. And then we do win-loss analysis. We even discuss them openly on weekly calls with the deal teams. And then we survey the field a great deal to understand what's working and what's not. That's just ongoing training. And then you get into what I call strategic enablement, going towards that quota. Account discipline is the act of figuring out what accounts you're not going to go after. In many cases, sales teams are chasing way too many accounts. So which ones are going to get us to our next number? And then you enable around those accounts specifically. Leadership training, which is overlooked. And then I call this end-to-end E2E, making sure that all the things that you see on this slide fit together so that the things that the customers are seeing is also consistent with our certification training. And then playbooks. In multiple organizations like at Optimizely and at Handshake, we've developed playbooks based on an industry or a persona, a one-stop shop where that rep, new or old, can go in there and find everything that they need to include competitive intel discovery. And then I mentioned the sales methodology. Rolling that out is something that frequently falls under the responsibility of enablement. And then stakeholder. Lastly is one of the most effective things you can do is interview the key stakeholders about what their needs are on a periodic basis. Don't assume everybody knows. Everybody talks about it, but who's capturing it? And that can be a key role that enablement can deliver.
Yeah, so I think this is again strategic enablement, more about the data-driven enablement, because you are leveraging the data before you run out any program or you go to the CRO or the sales leader that, hey, this is the initiative. You're going with a lot of insights, which they will not know. Sales leaders don't often, do the win-loss analysis and say, okay, this is the competency that we need to do for our reps. This is where when an enablement person is going to the CRO or the sales leader and saying, this is where we think the problem is and this is where the enablement can help, you automatically come across as a strategic partner. This is how you, again, coming back to the basic question, this is how enablement can elevate their role, by doing a lot of data-driven enablement.
Exactly. And then one thing I wanted to share with you, I'm a big fan of the enablement landscape report, and this is from last year. It says that the most common ratio of enablers to is 1 to 25. Well, if you're cutting back significantly and your enablement team is now supporting more than 50 people per enablement manager or enabler themselves, then your team is just going to be forced to do triage. They're going to be forced to do just basic things, as opposed to that strategic enablement that I showed on the previous slide. So be careful if you cut back too far, because what I'm seeing now is that people cut back in enablement teams, but the initiatives still need to get completed. They still need to get done. And there's no one left to do them because they didn't think about what's the right ratio of enablers to the people they support.
Yeah, again, this is the very first time I'm seeing this, maths that 1:25 is the ratio. I've often seen maths of the AE to SDR ratio and frontline sales managers to the reps ratio. But I think this is great. A lot of, again, enablement as a function is not very old. It's a new function that came around 10, 12 years back. And maybe a lot of people don't have clarity on how many enablement people should I hire. They end up hiring a lot of people and then also led to, layoffs. So I think this is something a lot of other practitioners, again, will see a lot of value, that this is the ideal ratio. It should be 25 reps into one enablement when they are planning for their enablement hire.
Exactly. They may have cut back on enablement teams, but the revenue targets haven't changed.
Yeah. Again, like everybody's saying they are forced to do more with less. And again, now more than ever, enablement needs to be there. It's not about, you can't hire a lot of reps today. It's all about how can you elevate one rep's performance or the performance of one rep, to achieve the numbers that you have.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So the one question I have, again, I think I touched upon this one, that enablement is not responsible for sales. They're not doing the sales, they're responsible to sales. So I think in a world where every deal must be won, how can enablement team up level rep skills and make them more effective?
Yeah, because one of the things that I wanted to do was making sure that, hey, when you're working with senior people, you can make them more effective. And as I mentioned, you may have one of your top reps that still has gaps in their skill level. And so I began with a seller health check. First of all, you need to validate their knowledge, like we discussed. Have they proven the critical knowledge? Both the rep themselves need to assess their level of knowledge and the managers. And I'll show you a slide on knowledge levels, because everybody comes to me and says, Scott, we need enablement around this. Well, what level of understanding do you need? And so that everybody seeing this right now has heard that before. We need enablement around this. Next is making sure they're actually certified on the product, the process, and the systems. We frequently think they need to be certified on the product, but are they also knowledgeable about the sales process? Have they demonstrated mastery of the sales motion that the company has adopted, if there is one? And then do they know their systems? Some people might need help with the systems that they use for prospecting, but they're afraid to ask. And so it's validating that they know that. And then nothing is more reinforcing than having to produce that demonstrate your knowledge of something in front of your peers. All of a sudden, I take it very, very seriously. So I find that solution presentation, being certified in front of their peers, is one of the most effective ways to make people do their homework and get that level of mastery. And the second is what I called Power of 4. It's a flexible support team. First of all, it's the rep themselves doing a self-assessment, like we talked about. The manager looking at their pipe, their deal quality, and their areas of expertise and development that they need. And then that's where the next person comes in. The enablement team member is supporting that individual based on their specific needs, and then to determine what's needed. And then one thing that is frequently overlooked is showing them what good looks like through a proven peer. And you have to be careful. With a tenured rep, you don't want to bring someone in to say, this, you're not doing it right. This person knows how to do it. But make it more of a collaborative exercise in which a proven peer is sharing, maybe with a group, about how they did their prospecting and their discovery. And on every organization I've been in, we've had a weekly meeting in which not just sellers, but the entire deal team would stand up and talk about how they won, not that they won. And I think sharing that knowledge is critical to making sure that people understand what good looks like.
I think this is one thing. Enablement people are again very smart. They know sellers love the spotlight. So I think giving them that platform to talk about how they won the deal, again, it helps to run those initiatives themselves. Like the other people will see, okay, this is how they have closed a deal. Maybe there's something good in this enablement program. So you don't have to run behind the sellers to adopt a particular thing. The other peer sellers are doing the selling for you. And the other thing is, right, again, coming back to the basics, doing a lot of analysis on what is required, where the problem is, like you're talking about, how doing the health check on what do they know, what knowledge that they have before even proposing any initiative. So yeah, again, very good insight, Scott, and I'm sure a lot of other people will find it valuable.
Thank you. And you made a very good point. They love the limelight. They like the spotlight. They also are very competitive. So
yeah,
you turn it into you gamify their success by showing them what good looks like, and then other reps will say, "Well, I need to be that good," and that's what I want to match what good looks like, and that's how you can achieve success. And enablement can help make that happen.
Yeah. Awesome, Scott. I think I know I have not been able to get out of all the information that you have. Unfortunately, we have a very short podcast on this particular topic, but again, like really looking forward to posting this. A lot of other enablement people will come, they will reach out to you, and I think that is where you can add more value. But yeah, it was a very new, fresh perspective on the maths that you have done. Again, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming. And yeah, we're really looking forward to publishing this and seeing the response.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that. Just one quick note here is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, the layoffs have happened in many teams. With people have lost headcount, but initiatives still need to be completed. And my organization brings fractional skills and talent in the form of leaders and team members to complete what you see here, of examples of key initiatives that still need to get done. And so I welcome people to reach out to me if they need help, but they are not able to get the headcount to support it. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. Really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely, Scott, and looking forward to. And I know you are standing up for enablement. I like how you are helping a lot of other leaders setting up the enablement process. Again, glad that I reached out, and looking forward to publishing this and see how it goes.
Thanks. I'm a raving fan of enablement. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.